We are done with the construction of the jacket. It's now time to add reinforcements and shoulder padding to enhance the look of the jacket. Shoulder pads normally do not have a uniform thickness. In V-Stitcher, we are not able to replicate a pad with uneven thickness. So in this lesson, we show a workaround to create shoulder pads and add sleeve wadding to a jacket. We also share a tip about simulating a shoulder pad or sleeve wadding. Here we have the shoulder pad patterns for the wearer's right side. We can create an X symmetry for the other side. The first step is to mark the points on the shoulder pad where we want to stitch to the jacket. There is already an internal line on the shoulder pad that indicates the shoulder line. In a real garment, we would attach the shoulder pad to the shell. However, in V-Stitcher, we recommend stitching the padding to the lining so that the effect of the point stitches doesn't show on the outside of the garment. Now we begin by adding the internal points to the shoulder pad. We rotate the patterns in the 2D window and align the shoulder pad on the front lining, matching the shoulder edge to the internal line marking on the shoulder pad. In the specification sheet, it states that we position the shoulder pad extending slightly out of the shoulder by about 1 centimeter. This is common when creating blazers, as this can help to give better shape to the top of the shoulder and sleeve. We do a clone by offset of 1 centimeter along this edge on the shoulder pad. We align the shoulder pad along the new marking and the shoulder line. Turn off textures in the 2D window so we can see both the patterns overlapping. Using the Insert tool, we insert a point on both patterns. First, we insert 2 points near the shoulder line, and another one close to the armhole opening. To insert the point on the lining pattern, we select the lining pattern, then in the context view, adjust the order to be the highest. If you are unsure of the order of the pattern, show the textures again to check which pattern is overlapping the other. We use the Insert tool to insert the points on the pattern and the points to be added on the lining instead of the shoulder pads. Then we use the Select tool to align the points to match the one added on the shoulder pad. The point should already be added to the other side of the shoulder pad and lining due to the symmetry of the patterns. We need to repeat the same process to add points for the back lining patterns. We rotate the pattern so that the points on the shoulder pads aligns with the back shoulder edge. Then we proceed to add the points on the shoulder pads and the lining. We add 3 points. Next, we adjust the order of the patterns and add the same 3 points on the back lining pattern. Since the back patterns are not symmetrical, we must remember to also add the point on the other side's back lining. We mustn't forget to rotate the shoulder pad patterns back once we're done. You can take a moment to pause the video to complete adding in the points on the shoulder pads and the lining patterns. As mentioned previously, we cannot create a pad with uneven thickness in V-Stitcher. So we want to split the pattern into different parts and apply fabrics of different thickness on each part to create a gradient in thickness for the shoulder pad. The shoulder pad we are creating has a gradual thickness and is 1.5 centimeters, 15 millimeters at its thickest width, and 0.3 centimeters, 3 millimeters at its thinnest. We use these values as a guide when we adjust the thickness. Firstly, we need to split the shoulder pad. We do so by selecting the curved edge of the shoulder pad and offsetting the edge. We do a clone by offset of -1.5 centimeters and 4 copies. Then, we select the internal lines and slice them. Note, there are many different kinds of shoulder pads. The way that the shoulder pad is sliced depends on the shape and type of the shoulder pad. In this case, the portion that would be attached closest to the sleeve cap is the thickest part, and the portion closest to the neckline is the thinnest part. If we want to create a shoulder pad that is thicker, we may have to slice the patterns into more sections, creating more copies of the line when we offset. For the other types of shoulder pads, you will need to experiment and decide how best to split them. For the shoulder pad, we are using a foam material. This is available in the download section. We add the fabric into V-Stitcher. We need to duplicate this fabric 4 times. Then we change the color so that it's less confusing when applied to the patterns. We recommend using a gradient of color so it's easy to spot the thinnest and thickest fabric. It looks like we need to change the color blending mode of these fabrics to multiply so that the color change is more visible. Then we assign the fabric to the different parts of the shoulder pads, like this. The next step is to edit the thickness of each portion. We right-click on the lightest and select Physics. This loads the Physics dialog box. The thickest part of the shoulder pad should be 15 millimeters. Click OK to apply. We go to the next one and reduce the thickness slightly to 12 millimeters. For the next one, we change the thickness to be 9 millimeters. The next one is 6 millimeters. And the last one is 3 millimeters. Once again, the in-between values are estimates, so if needed, we can always adjust the values later to achieve the desired look. One good practice is to rename the foam materials to indicate the thickness. You can pause the video here if you need more time to complete making the changes to the shoulder pad patterns and the fabric thickness of each section. The next step is attaching the shoulder pad to the lining patterns. We add the patterns into the shoulder cluster and adjust the rotation and position of the patterns to be just above the shoulder of the avatar. We clear the Use in 3D property to remove the patterns from the 3D window first. With the Stitch tool, we stitch the points we have added on the shoulder pads to the points on the lining patterns. We also check that all the pattern pieces are stitched together after they were sliced. Next is the 3D layer. The shoulder pad sits between the linings and the shell patterns. We can increase the shell pattern's 3D layers. The wearer's right front shell can be increased to layer 4. The lapel facing for the left side can be adjusted to layer 5, followed by the left side shell pattern, which should be on layer 6. The pocket flap and welt patterns also need to be adjusted for the left side. We change the lower welt pattern to layer 7, then the pocket flap to layer 8. Lastly, we change the top welt pattern to layer 9. The chest pocket pattern needs to be changed to layer 7. The back shell pattern should also be moved up by 1 layer. So the left side is layer 5 and the right side is layer 4. Since the lining is layer 2, we change the shoulder pad patterns to be layer 3 for both sides. You can pause the video to complete arranging, stitching, and adjusting the 3D layers. While adjusting the 3D layers, think of why these patterns need to be adjusted to those layers. Now we are ready to dress the shoulder pads. We want minimal simulation changes to the already simulated jacket. So what can we do before we dress the shoulder pad patterns? Is it A, turn on auto lock and dress the shoulder pads? B, lock just the shell patterns? Or C, lock just the lining and facing patterns? If you answered C, then you are correct. So why shouldn't we lock the whole garment or just the shell patterns? This is because we need the shoulder pads to go in between the shell and the lining. If we lock the simulation of the shell will not move to accommodate the thickness of the shoulder pads. Instead, by locking just the lining and facing patterns, it allows the garment to stay in its current shape, but also allows the shell to move and adjust the shoulder pads. Let's lock the lining and facing patterns. We select the lining and facing patterns, including the collar. Then in the Styling Tool Advanced section, we select Lock. Now we select the shoulder pad patterns and select Use in 3D. Then we go to the main toolbar and click Update 3D to allow the patterns to simulate. With the Pinch tool, we can help pinch the shoulders up slightly. The focus effect can help control the simulation better. To view what the shoulder pad looks like underneath, we change the transparency of the shell fabric. If we need to adjust the simulation of the shoulder pads, we use the focused effect to press down the shell patterns until we see the shoulder pad pattern exposed. Then we pinch on the shoulder pad pattern and adjust as needed. If needed, we could adjust the point's position on the lining. The thickness of the pads can also be adjusted if needed, based on the simulation. Sleeve wadding, or sleeve head roll, comes in different shapes and constructions, depending on the type of garment and shoulder construction, as well as the material that is used for the shell fabric. For this jacket, we are using this one-layered option that follows the shape of the sleeve cap. The sleeve wadding needs to be stitched to the sleeve cap of the lining patterns. Let's create an X symmetry for the other side. For the wadding, we are using a non-woven material. This material is available in the Download section. We add the non-woven material in V-Stitcher and assign it to the wadding patterns. We need to adjust the 3D layers of the garment again to accommodate the wadding. Similarly, the wadding sits between the shell and lining, and under the shoulder pad. For this, we lower the sleeve lining patterns instead of increasing the 3D layers of the shell patterns. We lower the sleeve lining patterns to layer 1. The wadding patterns should be on layer 2. Next, we add the sleeve wadding patterns to the arm cluster in Arrange mode. In a real jacket, the sleeve wadding would be stitched to the shell fabric. In V-Stitcher, we stitch the wadding to the lining instead, to avoid any pulling visual on the outside of the garment. We stitch the wadding to the lining patterns. There are already notches and corner points on the wadding patterns. It looks like our patterns need to be flipped as the notches don't match. We go to the context view and click Flip X before stitching. In the 3D window, the lining and facing patterns should still be locked before we dress the garment. We may need to use the styling tool to adjust the jacket. If you are seeing issues with the collar, you can clear Use in 3D, and then select it again to redress the collar. To finish off, we unlock all the lining and facing patterns to allow the garment to simulate for a little bit. Then we remove the transparency for the shell fabric. The jacket looks great so far. Remember to save your file before moving to the next lesson.